Female homosexual is a much more complex issue because female sexuality can go in all directions.
That's Dennis Prager sharing his intelligence on how human sexuality works. Apparently, it's different based on what your gender is. Curious about that. Now, he's got more to say, so why don't we look at that video in more context and we'll discuss.
John in Chardon, Ohio says homosexuals are born that way and they're children of God. They certainly are children of God. And I think male homosexuals are largely born that way. I don't think that it's genetic, but it might be hormonal in the womb. Female homosexual is a much more complex issue because female sexuality can go in all directions. Some are indeed like that, but many are not. That's why you hear often of actresses who say, oh, now I'm gay, and then they end up 10 years later marrying a man. You don't see that with gay men.
Could it be that society is a lot more friendly toward women who might want to experiment with their sexuality and not so friendly toward men who might want to experiment with their sexuality?
Impossible.
Yeah, so if a guy comes out and says, turns out I'm gay, it's because they've determined this is what my sexuality is, this is how I was born, and I'm comfortable identifying this way. Whereas with women, if they experiment and people know about it, they're not later judged if it turns out, no, I'm straight and I want to marry someone of a different gender.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff that we potentially could talk about. To be clear, he doesn't care. So people aren't just either straight or gay, they could be bi, they could be a whole bunch of different things. And the percentage of each gender identity that has a particular sexual identity doesn't necessarily have to be constant across gender identities. It could be that there are differences between men and women, genetic differences or behavioral differences or social acceptance differences and those sorts of things. It's 100% true that, as you said, the response is different. But also, like, even a willingness to identify yourself, for instance, as bi. Men who call themselves bi are not treated the same as women who call themselves bi, which definitely is gonna influence a person's willingness to identify in that way. But more important than any of this, which is interesting societally and in terms of anthropology and genetics and all that, who cares what the reason is? Let people smash who they want to smash and leave them alone. Could Dennis Prager just treat gay people's sexuality the way gay people treat his? They are not interested remotely. They don't want to know anything about it. The less heard, the better. What is the difference if it's genetic or behavioral? If it's a random choice that you change or you stick with it? You can't keep looking for reasons to be able to strip people's human rights away. It doesn't matter if it's hormonal in the womb or genetic, or they just got curious in college. They deserve the same rights. That's so incredibly simple.
Yeah, my philosophy on life is that I don't care about yours. And when I say I don't care about yours, I'm not talking about your actual life, like living, breathing life. I specifically mean who you love, who you're sleeping with, like how you identify gender-wise. I don't care, I just don't. I want you to be treated equally to everyone else. I don't want you to be discriminated against based on those things. Outside of that, I don't think about it at all. At all, I just don't, because it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't have any bearing on my day-to-day life. In fact, it has no bearing on my day-to-day life to be a decent person who shows love, respect, and compassion to others. I can't imagine sitting around obsessing over the sex lives of complete strangers as much as conservatives do.
Yep.
It is the creepiest thing, it is the weirdest thing, but that is what they do. I have never seen a group of people be more obsessed with like presenting themselves as individuals who sit around thinking about the genitals of children all day.
Yep.
You guys are creepy. Do you not understand how creepy that is? okay? I have no interest in getting involved in the personal lives of parents and the relationships that they have with their children and the decisions that they make together about what would be best for the children's lives, okay? That is up to the parents, that is up to their doctors, that is up to them. The government has no business involved in any of that, okay? We as private citizens have no business in any of that. In fact, nothing gets under my skin more than hearing people say annoying, judgmental things about parents. Because being a parent is so incredibly hard, and no one understands their children better than they do. So I would love it if this slow talking, fuddy-duddy man just stay out of the personal decisions that these families make for themselves.
Yep.
That's it, that's all it is, that's the whole game. And no, your gender doesn't have an impact on whether your sexuality is fluid or not. Society does though. Acceptance toward the gay community has a huge impact on whether or not they're comfortable, experimenting with their sexuality or coming out with what their sexuality is. But he wouldn't know that, would he? Because he's like literally one of the most out of touch people in media I've ever experienced. I was watching his show he does a show with this woman, I forget what her name is. I was like, sure, why not? Let's see what they're up to today. So I was watching their episode from yesterday. Dennis Prager was losing his mind over Obama's campaign slogan, hope and change. Because he's like, did it ever occur to him that maybe we don't need to change America? Yet he was an avid supporter of Make America Great Again, Donald Trump, right? Right? The cognitive dissonance is incredible. The creepiness, like the brazen, overt creepiness of the right wing and their obsession with the sex lives of complete strangers, also incredibly creepy. Yet they turn around and they accuse the left of having all sorts of weird perversions.
Maybe that's why it's so easy for them to project onto grade school teachers and assume they've got to be interested in the kids.
Stay in your room, okay?
They're just weird and creepy, but of course all by design.
Yeah.
Because if they get you to be such a creepy Karen who views politics through those lenses, if you're thinking about kids' penises and if you're thinking about whether women are more fluid or whatever, then you're probably not thinking about why your pay isn't keeping up with the cost of living and why you're probably not gonna be able to retire until you're 85 and why you might be thrown out of your house if you have a medical emergency. You're not gonna be focusing on that stuff if you're focusing on second grade teachers supposedly wanting to sleep with your kid.
And look, if personal, intimate matters happen to be the only matters that take up the cognitive function of Dennis Prager, I don't know, focus on your own personal matters. You've been divorced twice, bro. All right, Mr. Conservative, yeah, I'm calling it out. You've been divorced twice. So maybe instead of thinking about the sex lives of complete and utter strangers, maybe a little love and affection in your sex life. Pay a little attention to that. None of my business. Would prefer not to have to think about it. But in terms of what you should be thinking about, that's the only area where it makes sense. Other than that, keep your nose out of other people's sex lives and personal preferences on how they live. It's none of your business.
Agreed.